Hello, America. Welcome to your Leo Nation. I am the chief, Mark Garrett. Now, I may be the chief, but I have the boss sitting across from me today uh, to help me reinforce what we believe here at Leo Nation, and that is the rule of law, a civil society, and self responsibility. I like to welcome my big brother, Danny Garrett. Danny, what's happening, bro?
Yeah, I'm glad to be here today, but
Uh oh.
I got to start off with the story here. I don't mean to hog the show, but when you say the boss, now I don't know, Mark, if you ever realized this, but you were mom's favorite. Now, one story that I tell everybody, and I don't know why this thing is just embedded in my brain. Is I'm 67 years old. It's never gone away. You must have been probably a year and a half old. We're living in LA off of 116th place. Now, one thing about me, I'm 7.5 years older than you are. And so for 7.5 years, I ran a night scam in the household. Okay. That was my domain. Everybody catered to me. I was, I was the guy in charge. I was the little baby brother that everyone took care of. Then all of a sudden you came along and kind of ruined my scam there. So I remember Mark, even though you could talk, you never did, only when you had to. And I never remember this night. We were in the kitchen and you were and you're pointing at the cabinet because you wanted something. And mom comes in, she goes, Danny, she goes, Mark wants cereal, feed him. And I'm going, well, mom, he needs to ask for it. And so she walks out, and I'm looking at you, Mark, what do you want? And you're and you're pointing there, and you aren't saying anything, and you're just pointing. And I'm really getting frustrated. So I'm calling mom, and mom's yelling at me, telling me to get whatever you want, but you aren't telling me because you're doing it on purpose, of course. You got your scam going now. And so I remember, okay, you want some cereal. So I'm mad at you. I'm going, okay, you want some cereal. Okay. So I get the cereal, I put in the bowl, I put the milk there, put the spoon in front of you, and you look at me and you take your arm and you knock that bowl off that table. And it's I'm going, what is wrong with you? And so I'm yelling, mama, mark through the cereal on the floor. Danny, clean it up. And you sit with this smug look on your face going, this is my domain now, brother. And I'm going, ain't this a blip? My scam just got so when you talk about the boss, that's my boss story, okay?
Now, look, for those of you who are actually viewing this, when you see, and Eddie can hear, but you see his charisma and you see his influence he's had over me. This is one of the greatest storytellers you're ever going to come across in your life, and this is why I brought him on. Now, I've heard that story before, but I had forgotten about it. So I don't know if I'm embarrassed or if I'm proud about that scam I pulled. But by the way, it only worked for so long.
Right, exactly.
It only worked for so long. It wore off, and man, when it wore off, it wore off in a big way. So, we'll probably get to some of that. But speaking of stories, Danny, and that is a great one. And of course, our sisters would reinforce those types of stories about our respective childhoods. But we do have some great stories. You have some great stories, and like everything else we do here at Leo Nation, the stories you tell, maybe sometimes the facts that we recite, it's all about law enforcement and whether it's external, it's internal, it's self responsibility. It's all about law enforcement. And we grew up at a time when law enforcement was under attack. Our society was under attack in ways we didn't see until about really 50 years later. And you and I had been through some stuff. I almost said through some shit, but I didn't. So, so I told the story before, like, and you just mentioned we grew up in Southeast LA. A lot of people know it as Watts because that's about where it was, right across the street from Nickerson Gardens, and it was a hellhole back during the mid '60s. And but again, you are 7.5 years older than I am. So you go back to 1965 during the Watts riots, and you were about 10 years old. And you have a pretty good recollection of that, do you not?
Yes, absolutely.
And just tell us about, what you recall on that
Well, it
time.
was I remember it was a hot August night. Mm. I was out for it was mom, myself, we had a neighbor, I think it was remember Miss Kincaid?
I sure do.
We were
Strange
out
strange woman.
strange, very strange woman. You know, we would call her devil woman now or something, She looked like the devil, but, Miss Kincaid, we were out front, and I I believe Cheryl and June might have been out front too.
Our sisters.
Yeah, our sisters. 'Cause I remember it was a really hot evening. Now, of course, we didn't know what was going on. What we lived off 116th Place, and we were just east of, Avalon, and we could see down the street that there was stuff that was happening, but, in LA where we grew up, stuff happened, and so you weren't really ever, whatever. So, as we're talking about what's going on and we hear this ruckus going on, all of a sudden, down the street comes probably 3 or 4 black and whites, high-speed lights are on, sirens are on, and these guys have, like, this heavy enforcement. I mean, it wasn't like a two-man unit or one-man, there were, like, 4 police officers. We're going, "God, what the heck is going on?" And so, eventually, you turn the TV on, and now all of a sudden we see LA's exploding. And it didn't explode right away, but there was like a big riot going on. People were fighting, whatever. Officers are out there kind of tussling and going on. Things really didn't explode until the next day. And that's when they went down to Will Rogers Park and stuff started exploding down there. And then from there, of course, they went down to 103rd and they burned 103rd down. They burned a Safeway down off Imperial. I mean, well, they just burned the city down
Mhm,
pretty much.
mhm.
And so my recollection of that is just really just now, of course, mom and dad kept us in the house. Dad had to keep going to work. Mom stayed home mom. And so we had to stay in the house.
Mhm.
Of course, that was mom's rules.
Right.
When you're 9 years old, you're indestructible.
Mhm.
And so you just think that, hey, the people are just having a good time. We want to
Mm.
go out there and see what's going on. But mom said, no, you got to stay in the house.
Mhm.
And so, of course, you weren't going out anywhere at your age. And
I was having you make cereal for me.
yeah, absolutely. Okay.
City can burn, but you better feed
Right.
me.
You got to be that. Absolutely. And now, yeah, I remember uh, an incident that happened during the riots at the house, because it was super hot in there August. And of course, we didn't have air conditioning in the house. Air conditioning was open up all the windows. And
Mhm.
then of course, we had the old fans and stuff that just circulated out air. And I remember one morning daddy went to work. I get up in the morning, it's super hot. And I go to plug the fan in. Now, when I plug the fan, I don't know what happened, but the switch caught fire. So it caught fire, it went out on its own. And so mom calls daddy at work. At the time, he's working at the Henry Company. She calls him. Well, guess what? He tells her to call the fire department.
Mhm.
Now, she does. And lo and behold, guess who shows up? And I'm surprised that, during this time they showed up. And but they come with all these engines, they come with all these PD, National Guards hanging off the fire. And for a kid like me, it was exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm going, these fire trucks, the National Guard, they had the streets blocked off. They had a chopper that came over the head real low. It circled, made sure everything was all code for, and then it flew off. And at that time, where I later found out, since I'm a retired fireman, that's when the Los Angeles City Fire Department created their task force system. Because before they used to just run with an engine or a truck, but during the riots, since they had to double up so many apparatus, they created a task force, meaning a task force was a big ladder truck and 2 engines. That was considered a task force. And that's where LA developed that system.
Mhm.
But the riots, for me, when you're a 9-year-old kid, you don't really understand what's going on and the impact. It was just, we understood that people were angry. And I didn't even really understand the political issue about all this.
Mhm.
I just thought that police officers got into a tussle with people and they got mad. So they decided to burn stuff. I
Mhm.
never, if for a 9-year-old kid, you don't think the political aspects of it. You just see things burning, and but I was never really afraid. I don't think that my sisters showed, June, our sisters, I should say, I don't think any of them were afraid. No one ever really, the only people that we were afraid for was mom, because,
Right.
mom looked Caucasian.
Right.
And so we didn't want her to go out anywhere.
Right.
But I never, I never expressed any fear for daddy going to work because,
Mhm.
because to me, you know, our father was
Uh-oh.
Our father was indestructible.
Mhm.
World War II veteran,
Mhm.
came from the South as a little kid. And so for me, he was indestructible. So I never really feared for my dad's, for daddy's, safety.
Right.
It was really for mom. Mom, we don't want you to go out because you look white
Right.
and you might get attacked. But outside of that,
It's right. It was the excitement factor. It's funny you talk about the LA City fire and, of course, later on, LA County fire task forces that they developed, and it was out of circumstances
right,
like this. And the reason I just touched on that specific thing you talked about is because it's so important for people to realize how things evolve. Law enforcement, fire, first responders, why we who were in public service for so long do certain things the way that we do them or did them, where those things came from. It goes back to one word I hype on a lot, Danny, that's perspective and its appreciation for history and evolution, how things get to where they are. You know, Fast forwarding a little bit is get into the late 60s and you're in your real formative years. Now I'm catching up with you. Now I'm about, 7 years old. We get to like say 1970. But we're seeing now a real, you know, uh, fruition of just general crime now and the birth of gangs, namely the Crips, the Bloods. I talked about this in a previous episode with Deputy District Attorney John McKinney, who's running for DA to hopefully out that monster Gascon. But we talked about the general crime wave that came out of the 1960s. And you were around, of course. Now, mom was smart enough to keep you out of high school down the street, Lock High, and she every day drove you back all the way out to basically LAX to Westchester High School.
right.
But still, I know that as a teenager, you still had to be influenced or at least affected. That's more from that gang activity where we actually lived. Is that right?
Right. Well, and this is why I tell people when people ask me questions about growing up in LA, one, you got to understand that it's almost like two different time periods. It is different time periods because when I grew up in South Central LA, they call it Southeast, South Central LA. When I grew up there, remember, these guys were post World War II veterans. They were Korean War veterans. The Vietnam War was just starting. So those guys really were just young guys going in. But these fathers that were coming out here and the mothers, they were all a part of the greatest generation. And so these guys they're coming out of the South, they're migrating here to California. They had already experienced stuff that these young kids that haven't been on since breakfast, that they talk in this day and age, they talk about now about racism. And it always kind of just bewilders me because I'm thinking, now, I know my mom and dad experienced racism, and I was born in a period where civil rights was going on and things were really kind of getting better and stuff. And so I can never understand why kids talk so much about racism now, but that's a different subject matter. But growing up in LA, I always tell people, remember, we had moms and dads that were together. We had dads that worked, moms, most of the moms were stay-at-home moms. They were heavily involved in school activities, PTAs. They volunteered. I know that our mom did.
Mhm.
And so the kids were raised differently, but somewhere along the line, those parents lost, I don't know if say they lost control or they got so involved in mm, mm, chasing that American dream that they cut their kids loose somehow. And but for me, growing up in South Central LA, like I said, I actually liked it. I mean, I loved it. I mean, because that's all I knew. But my parents kept me, and I keep saying our parents. I know for me at least, they really kept control of what I did, which I'm so thankful for. You know, daddy worked hard. He worked a lot of overtime, and mom was a disciplinarian. One thing that I liked about mom was that mom didn't negotiate. I see parents nowadays, they count to 3 or 10 or 1,000, the kids are, mom was pretty much do it. And then when you didn't do it, it was like, bang. Okay. And I don't mean
Immediate consequences.
exactly. And I don't mean can't watch TV or use your Xbox because we
Mhm.
didn't have any of that
Right.
back then.
Right.
It was basically get whatever weapon that she could find
Mhm.
that can inflict as much damage on you as possible.
Now, I gotta chime in here because that's not an over exaggeration.
Right.
In fact,
Exactly. Right.
it's redundant. It's not an exaggeration.
Right.
Whether it was a broom handle, it was a wire coat hanger. I remember a lotion bottle that she tossed at you. Now, thank God for you, she was a bad aim and went
She's
through the dining room window.
Absolutely.
But
Right.
but mom would attach herself to whatever weapon was
Right.
available
Exactly.
to inflict retribution for failing to follow her rules.
Absolutely.
And of course, as kids, we thought that she was overdoing it.
Right.
And by the way, probably sometimes she did, but like you said, Danny, you're grateful for it because it's exactly what kept our asses in line, and it made us different than a lot of our peers that we're associated with early on in life. So anyway, but go ahead and continue.
No, and you're absolutely correct. It's just like when you talked about our local schools, you know, mom and dad were they were they were very insightful. They saw the future before the future was happening. Um, when she took Cheryl and June. Now, Jeannie was quite a bit older than us.
Mm.
Jeannie was what 9 years older than Cheryl.
Yeah.
So Jeannie she went to Gompers. Now, when Gompers was mixed, you had whites, you had Hispanics, you had blacks. Then she went to, and then Jeannie eventually went to Fremont High School. Once again, I remember picking up Jeannie from school when I was a little boy. When I got out of school, mom would pick me up and go pick Jeannie up. Well, I see white kids on campus. That's
Right.
at Fremont. Now you don't see that at all anymore. That's gone. But mom saw the changing demographics. She saw the changing educational policies. Mom saw a lot of things changing, and she saw that changing in where the area that we grew up. And so mom made an early decision to get us out of that because it was all about success for her. And so, she pulled Cheryl and June out, put them in Ascension. I went to Ascension. When they were done at Ascension, we went to Overwrite. Now, when Cheryl and June went to Overwrite, it was all white.
Mhm.
I think Cheryl and June and maybe a couple other black kids were the only black kids there, but it was all white. When I got there, Cheryl had already finished. It was June, myself, and I remember two of the blacks when I first started there.
And going back a little bit, just so everybody knows, Ascension is a private Catholic elementary
Right.
school,
Right.
and which was not far from her house over in Vermont.
Right.
But it was just that it was a private parochial school, and it shared mom's values.
Right.
We're not Catholic, and I went to Catholic elementary school
Right.
later on. We'll,
Right.
we'll get to maybe, but it was all, Danny. It had nothing to do with race. It just so happened that the schools that mom related to, as far as values, as far as teachings, beliefs, happen to have white kids going there,
Right.
but it was about the values that they supported and they
Absolutely.
perpetuated.
Right. And that's absolutely correct. It had nothing to do with race. Mom wanted to put us in a winning position, and that's what it was all about. Gorillas could have gone there. She didn't, and she didn't really care. She
Well, when you got there, at least one gorilla was
Yeah,
going
well,
there. Yeah.
I was a head gorilla, and, but, and the thing is that, I really when I got there, I really felt comfortable in that environment. It was a very calm environment. I liked it, and I'm not trying to knock anything. It was just a really good learning environment. And that's what I think that's what mom wanted. Mom just wanted a good learning environment. And that's what she wanted. And she saw trends change and she was up on that. And so that's one thing that I really, really, really thank my parents for is having that insight and the courage to do that.
That's right.
She kind of put us in a situation where it was a little intimidating because I'm used to a certain environment, and also ripped out of there, and then she puts us in a different environment. But I really appreciate it because it helped build my character because she told all of us, "You're gonna go there and you're going to like it and you're gonna compete. You aren't gonna come back home. You aren't gonna complain. You aren't gonna blame, whatever. This is what you're gonna do." And but those were the orders.
Yep.
And so we couldn't come back and point it. Now you, sure, Genie, all did me. I was a resident jokester, idiot, whatever you want to call me. And I get it. I was, I went to school with the number on my chest. Okay. You know, you know, and so, they told me I was to be working at San Quentin, but not as a guard. But by the grace of God and mom's heavy hand, I voted that. But you know, and that's why I appreciate about our mother was just because she just instilled those values on us, and she didn't let us off the hook on
Right.
that. And and that really for me was my foundation built.
Yeah. It's interesting because I want to hear more from you about this, and we will. We're going to jump into our geographical move that we made in 1973. Um, but and I'm going to get a little bit in front here. Later on, when we did move, and I started elementary school in Alhambra, not started, but transferred to that school going into fourth grade, and it was an all white school. I mean, virtually all white, Hispanics, and a couple of blacks, but for the most part, it was a white school, Ramona Elementary School in Alhambra. And after one semester, my mom said, "Nope, uh-uh." She couldn't stand some of the faculty. She couldn't stand some of the things that were being taught. And what did she do? She took me out of that all white school and put me in a Catholic elementary school whose values that she more related to. So again, I just want to reinforce that had nothing to do with race. It was all about
Right, right.
values. So about that move, Danny. So in 1973, what's now the 105 freeway here in Southern California pretty much goes from Los Angeles International Airport to about 25 miles inland. And that freeway bought our house. Actually, the state bought our house for the construction of that freeway in 1972. They gave us a year to move. In 73, we moved to Alhambra, which is in the San Gabriel Valley, about 10, 15 miles northeast of downtown Los Angeles. And at the time, Alhambra was about 90% white. And now here you are as a 18-year-old, right? 73, moving into this. So now you're like in your full-blown 18-year-old, hormones out of control. I got to be out with the dudes. I'm chasing girls. This is like hard guy. Everything we think about, listen, when we were growing up, about an 18-year-old guy. And you move into a neighborhood we do that looks nothing like where we grew up. Tell me about your experiences growing up from 73 in Alhambra, just, on the social level, and talk about a couple of cop stories, which are great.
Oh, couple of cop stores. Oh my gosh. Like I said, I was the kind of black sheep. But one, moving to Alhambra was for me, this is for me, it was I'm trying to find the right word to use. It was very liberating because I left an environment that I was used to. I was born and raised in that environment. But when I moved to Alhambra, Alhambra's was kind of a utopia because when I got there, there was, at least to my knowledge, there was no gangs. I got on my bike and I rode the streets. I never feared anybody jumping me. Um, I I just, I didn't even feel out of place. Like you said, in Alhambra, actually in Alhambra, they had an area where there was a black populace,
Right.
but it was away from where we lived. So, you had to travel to get there a little bit. I mean, Alhambra's not that big of a city, but nevertheless, they did have blacks living there, but it wasn't, those faces weren't a regular sight on the streets.
Mhm.
And so I would have been considered something that was unusual in Alhambra. Not out of the ordinary,
Mm.
but just unusual. And for me, it was a very liberating move. I just felt like I had a second lease on life because I feel like I can go out here and even though growing up in LA, we ran the streets, but we ran the streets for me at least on a very limited basis. And when we're and and and, and you and I can relate to this because and I don't want to really revert back much, but when we talk about gangs in LA, I don't you and I didn't have experience with that because we didn't run with that crowd.
We weren't allowed.
We weren't allowed. And so I see documentaries, I see programs, and you see movies with the depiction of the gangs and everything else, and all these, you see all this stuff happening. That wasn't my lifestyle because I didn't run the streets at a certain at nighttime. I had to be in doing homework and everything else. I just had to be in the house. And so for me, running the streets just wasn't on Saturdays and Sundays I could, but Monday through Friday, I was at school playing sports, then coming home and doing homework. So I never really had that experience with that. So I didn't really have much knowledge of it. We knew about Crips, we knew about Bloods, I knew about APBs, Athens Park Boys, things like that. You knew about where the gangs were. You just avoided.
Mhm.
And so it's just like with the police department in LA. People have a super negative view on that. I never did.
Right.
Because I never had police encounters when I was small. I just didn't do anything bad. And so I was a practical joker. Okay, no, trust me, I I did my stuff, but I didn't do anything that was law breaking.
Mm.
I did stuff that pissed the neighbors off. Okay. And when they beat me, they called my mom and then she beat me some more, but you know, we weren't thugs. We weren't the type of kids that went out and caused problems like that. So for us, our interaction with the police department was almost zilch.
Right.
Um, now I did get 2 tickets when I was a kid for speeding, well, and I still speed, but now I have a badge now. So, okay. So, you know, th- that badge is worn out now. So, I can't even use your card anymore. So, you retired on me. My God, this world's collapsing around me, but so
Mm.
but like I said, I never had any really bad I never had any bad interactions, with the police because now moving forward now to Alhambra, Alhambra was just a place where I could just go out, ride my bike, walk the streets. I never thought about any gangs running up behind me and shooting at me, yelling at me, asking me what clique I'm from. I was just a normal kid. Now I got to be a normal now once again, now I started college at East LA College. So that once again, that took up my time playing football and stuff. But
Mm.
Alhambra move was a phenomenal move for me.
Now, let me clarify, Danny. You're telling me that you were more concerned, at least historically, from our time in Southeast Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. You were more concerned about gang affecting your safety than you were law enforcement.
Oh,
This
absolutely.
can't be true.
I
It's impossible.
I
Are
mean,
you telling me that back then to this day you don't think that law enforcement is the number one threat to your safety in this country? Is that what you're saying?
law enforcement and when I wa when
Yes, I'm being a little
oh,
sarcastic. I can't help
absolutely. Oh,
myself.
absolutely. I'm just trying to reserve myself so you
Yes,
don't
I
get
am
thrown
being sarcastic, folks.
so you don't get thrown off the air here. Yeah,
Yes.
because if you guys took the reins off me, trust me, the world would probably
Hey,
hate me. You know,
you're released. You're free to go.
I mean, trust me, you're going to get a lot of negative feedback if I really let loose here.
I doubt it.
When I lived in L.A., the police actually were the heroes because when you were walking the street and you saw black and white, you got relief because you knew, okay, there's help right there. I mean, I never, now I was born in 1955. We moved in 1973. I was 17 years old. I turned 18 in October. So I'm 17. So 17 years, I grew up in South Central LA. I walked the streets. I went to school there. I have friends there and everything else. Now, once again, my geographic area that I roamed was limited because you knew crossing certain areas, you just didn't do it. It's like we lived kitty corner from Nickerson Gardens,
Right.
one of the worst housing projects in LA. And it always has been
Still
and
is.
it always will be.
Yeah.
That Jordan Downs Imperial Course. I mean, all these things, these were just lousy, lousy projects. So you did not go into, even though a couple of times I ventured in to Nixon Guards. Remember Brian
Of
Gardner?
course.
Because Brian was an idiot. So Brian and now Brian was a thug.
Yes.
And so now
Yes, he
since we
was.
were neighbors and friends, he would venture over there. So sometimes on rare occasions, we would walk through Nicholson Gardens. But of course, your head's on a swivel and you wore your PF flyers because you're ready to run. And and so, but the police were not my never, I never woke up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm going to get shot by a police officer today. That just never crossed my mind. I never thought I'm going to get pulled over and get harassed. The only time I feared the police was when I was going down Manchester Boulevard doing Mach 16. Okay. Burning the paint off my car. I'm running the gutter passing people. Now my head's on a swivel 'cause I'm looking for black and white because a black and white's going to pull me over and give me a ticket. And and yes, a black and white one day did pull me over. I'm coming from Westchester. Of course, I'm doing like 6,000 miles per hour in the 25-mile-an-hour zone. Okay. He pulled, and he was the nicest cop in the world.
Uh-huh.
He goes, "Hey, didn't you see me sitting there? Dude, I'm going so fast I can't see anything. It's a blur." Okay. You remember Star Wars when he hits the afterburners? That's how it was. Okay. You know, I I see nothing. I didn't even know where my brake pedal was. Okay. You know, and he actually gave me a ticket. And but I was playing football and we were getting ready for the playoffs, which we didn't make. But he goes, "Hey, listen, I want to set your court date past your playoffs. So make sure
Wow.
if you guys show up, okay." Really nice guy, but I deserve the ticket.
Right.
But it was a real simple stop. He didn't, we talked football, matter of fact,
Mhm.
and so, and to be honest with you, now I can honestly say, and I know I'm getting off the beaten path with Alhambra, but I can honestly say now I've been driving for 50 years.
Mhm.
And now on a conservative estimate, I've probably been stopped over my 50 times probably by law enforcement because I speed.
Right.
I I break the law. Oh, the light's red. Well, no, was there the intersection? I go faster. Hey, stop sign means stop for somebody else. Okay. Yeah, you guys stop, not me. Okay. I am being conservative when I say that. Probably been stopped 50 times by law enforcement over the years.
Mhm.
Now, granted, the last 30 years or so, I mean, I carry a badge, but my whole point with that is that I've never had a bad encounter.
Right.
Obviously, I'm still alive and breathing. Now, have I encountered a couple of police officers that were a little, whatever? Yeah, but you just ignore them, and you just do what they say, and then
Mhm.
yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, I was speeding. You got me. Yes, sir. Yeah, yes. They asked me, did you realize that you were doing 85? Oh, that's it. Uh, Oh, I was going slow today. Matter of fact, I just got started about 2 weeks ago in Chino Hills.
Mhm.
I'm going down this back street. It's a little cut off. There's a stop sign. Of course, I didn't stop because there's no one there. And it just sure enough, there's a cop sitting up off the hill. I pulled right over. I mean, I pulled over before he can even turn on his engine. And I'm sitting there waiting for him. And he pulls up behind and he's smiling. And it's a white cop. He I go, yeah, I know. I blew that sign. And he goes, hey, he goes, yeah, he goes, did you see me? Yeah. So I just I forgot what the book club was, you know, but he let me slide. Yeah, you got me. I'm dead to rights. You got me. I blew the stop sign. What do I sign? He goes, hey, next time, just stop.
Mhm.
That's all he said to him.
See, this is fascinating. I mean, I say fascinating. On one hand, it's not fascinating, Danny, because it's it's logical what you're saying. Well, I say fascinating. I say it's fascinating when you juxtapose your experiences, like you said, conservatively. You say you've been stopped 50 times in your life, as you know, as being a black male motorist, and you've never had a negative experience, not to the extent where you've ever been physically abused or you've been even verbally abused, maybe a nasty cop, but that's about the end of it. I guess so. It's juxtaposed to the claim that if you are a black motorist, especially a black male, you get stopped by a white cop, the chances of being injured or killed are super, super high. Either you're lying to the audience right now, or or what we hear from the media is not true. And we all know where I fall, where you fall on this. It comes down to, yep, I blew a stop sign. Sir, where do I sign? Ma'am, where do I sign? Whatever. And then you let the cop do what the cop is supposed to do. The chances of actually being injured or killed by a cop, if you comply, even if the cop is wrong, are virtually zero, zero, especially in today's day and age where everything is recorded. I mean, a lot of law enforcement agencies have body cams. Almost all of them have in-car cams, and everybody on the highway is a self-designed publisher with their cell phones now. So it's just it's so aggravating. We hear this about law enforcement as if law enforcement is the problem. So fast forwarding to Alhambra and about a story you've told many times and never gets old is the Jack in the Box
Oh
story.
God, the Jack in the Box
And
story.
the reason I bring this one up, we did talk about it. The reason I want you to talk about this is because this is a little bit different than a regular traffic stop.
Right,
This is something that really could have gone sideways,
right, right.
but but because of your behavior and the behavior of the people you were with, it didn't go
Right.
sideways. So you take it from there and give us a shorter version of that story.
Okay, it's kind of a funny story, and praise my parents, but they're both expired, and they've moved on. So, because my mom and dad, of course, mom and dad never knew about this. But anyway, I believe it's a Friday night. Myself, two of our buddies that we're driving around in his in his Roadrunner. We want something to eat. It's probably midnight, 12:30. We're at the San Gabriel Alhambra border on Las Tunas. There's a Jack in the Box there. So we pull in.
Still there.
It's still there. Absolutely. Even after all these years. it, it's still there. So so we pull in. Back in the day, you go in there, you hit the little cord that lays across the driveway, and a ding 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 ding, and they go, "May I take your order, please?" Okay. Well, we did the old ding 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 ding. What comes up?
Now, by the way, for anybody like under
Oh, that's right. God,
40,
right,
maybe,
right,
you don't know what that little ding, ding, ding cord is,
right,
but
exactly.
it was a rubber, it kind of looked like a smaller version of a water hose,
Right,
usually all black in color. And when you drove over it, it would set off a little electronic thing that would ring a bell
right,
to let the attendant at the window know you were there. So
right,
go ahead.
right. And back then, like I say, I'm aging myself. I'm like 6,000 years old here, but the guy would come out. May I take your order, please? That's what Jack's supposed to say. And so, you know, dumb old clown. But anyway, so we go over there, and so we hit the cord, nothing happens. And so now we think that these guys are just being jerks because, oh, yeah, it's 12:30. They want to close up, but they don't want to feed us anymore. These bums. And so we're all pissed. And so I go, hey, go, hey, Steve, why don't you do a, why don't you jack up? Okay. So, he's in this big 383 Roadrunner and he backs in the cord. And like my Mark said, it's like, it's thinner than a water hose. It's probably maybe a quarter inch in
Probably
diameter,
half
a
inch.
half inch maybe. So we back those tires up over there, and he does this big smoky burnout on it, and just rips the cord. So Jack now has vocal cord damage. Okay, so Jack can't go, man. Take your order anymore. So we rip Jack's throat out, and so we go, and so now because there's smoke everywhere, so we go up to the window. And so we're young, there's three of us. We're all young. Hey, come on out, you cheapskates, make us some food. We're hungry. Well, of course they are coming out. And so we're yelling. I'm leaning across the drivers. I got my head in there. I go, Steve, turn this thing around. So we go out and he turns back in. He comes. Now we're facing the wrong way. And I'm halfway in the window now. I could have crawled this. Where are you bums? You guys don't want to work. I'm hungry. Feed me now.
No, let me interject here. He just gave me a detail on the story that I either didn't hear before or I forgot that you guys made a U-turn.
Yes.
So now you're in the wrong way
We're coming the wrong
in the
way.
trailer.
And
So
so I'm leaning out the passenger. I'm halfway in the service window now. Okay. I mean, I could go in there and feed myself. I could have grabbed a cup and filled it with cup and taken it. I mean, I'm about feed me. We're all yelling, we're all laughing. So of course, no. I said, these bums, how dare they? So I said, Steve, roll the car. So Steve pulls the car up because Steve had the big 383, the big tires. She just this another big smoky burnout. You can't even see anything. There's smoke going all the windows and stuff, and we're all laughing. Well, if we do this and we're getting ready to leave, guess what? Alhambra, St. Gabriel, county sheriffs, they all just come flying up there. And we're thinking, God, we're getting charged for murdering Jack. Okay. And so we go in the parking lot, and of course, they come out with shotguns. They're out there. And they aren't using kind language. Get the get the fuck on the ground. We're gonna put your fucking head. Now I'm staring down this 45 auto. My hands are on the deck. We're all sitting there.
Mhm.
So now I had just had shoulder surgery.
I remember.
And I'm in a sling. One at a time, they get out of the car. And I told the guy, I go, yeah, I just had surgery. Oh, fuck it. Guess what? I flattened out. So they get us all out there. They bring the guys. They bring the guys out there. I go, oh, there you guys are. And they go, oh, those aren't the guys. And okay, so then they get us all up. And they go, oh, yeah, there a 211 just occurred.
No, 211 is an armed robbery.
211 is an armed
So
robbery.
just to clarify what had happened, just before Danny and his, fellow destroyers of public property, private property, show up, an armed robbery had occurred. And that's why these employees wouldn't come to the window. It had nothing to do with them running over that cord. They were frightened for their lives because they had just been held up at gunpoint right before you guys had pulled up.
Just several minutes
So
right before.
You talk about circumstances, you talk
Right.
about coincidences.
Right.
And then here's Danny, one of like 13 Black people in Alhambra, who's at the scene of an armed robbery,
Right.
and these cops show up. I
Right.
just wanted to clarify
Right.
that for the
Right.
listeners. So go ahead.
Exactly. And the thing is that, stuff could have gone bad like right now because these guys came out locked and cocked. They weren't messing around because a robbery just occurred. And so if we had done anything stupid, we probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But all of us were smart enough to know, don't do anything until we're told to do it. Don't get angry. Don't say anything. Even after they let us up, we weren't angry. I'm just saying, man, listen, it's time for me to go home. Okay. I just want to go home. Okay. And I didn't even have time to argue with anybody. One of the police officers approached and said, yeah, 211 just occurred. And like you said, they were, they called us, they were back there in the hiding. And so all we heard was robbery just occurred. We didn't do it. We thought we were going to get charged for murdering Jack. Okay. Right. And they cut us and they say, get out of here, go home. We got it. We went straight home and never looked back. Never told mom or dad about it. I didn't want them to get involved. 'Cause nothing they can do.
Right. Plus,
And
if they had found out that you had been an accessory to
they would have
destroying
murdered.
private property,
They
right,
would have murdered me.
you would have asked the cops to come
Come back.
take me. Yeah,
Right.
right.
I would have gone and committed a 211 since I could go to jail and say for mom, especially mom. Dad was kind of more understanding.
Yeah.
I mean, he would have gotten angry, but mom would just like you said, was not tied down. I could beat him with.
Right.
Okay. And so I would have gone out and committed a robbery just to save myself from her.
Mhm.
And so, but once again, it shows you how things and the police officers have no idea what's going on.
Right.
They're just reacting to radio calls.
It's such a great point. I want you to finish that. It's such a great point that they're simply responding
Right.
to a call for
Hell.
help. So go ahead.
And, Mark, I mean, I spent a short period of time in law enforcement myself. I mean, these officers, eh, you did it for 33 years. I mean,
30.
30 years.
It felt like 33.
Right,
But go ahead.
exactly. Right. But, these guys they're just on patrol or whatever they're doing. They're driving around just on patrol and they get a radio call. And the radio call obviously is is just a fraction of what's actually going on. So you really have no idea what's really happening. You get a radio call. This is what the dispatcher's telling you, but you really still don't know what's going on. So they're just coming up here and reacting to what they see and what the radio call is all about. It's not like they don't have any uh, these this perception. There's something that's preconceived.
Right.
It's just I get a radio call and I'm going there. It's just like when I spent 30 years as a fireman. We get a call, rescue 26. This is what the call says. Now, we're just, okay, the call says short of breath. That's all it says. When we get there, 9 out of 10 times, it wasn't short of breath. That's how they called it in. We go there and you get there and it's like, it's something, oh, I hurt my toe. And so I can't breathe. And, it's hard for me to breathe because I bumped my toe on the chair and it hurts so bad I can't breathe. But they do that to get the response.
Mhm.
And so, but like I said, the officers kept their cool. We kept our cool, most importantly, and we followed instructions. We were delayed for maybe 5 minutes or whatever. They got them out. And at the end of the day, everybody was fine.
Went home safe.
Went home safe.
Everybody went home safe. And even under those heated, tense circumstances, they said the cops kept their cool. You guys kept your cool. And at the end of the day, everybody was safe. And this is at the core, talk about Danny, talk about self-policing, doing the right thing. Unlike my brother here, stop at the stop sign. But you know what? If you do blow a stop sign and you get stopped, whose fault is that? The cop's fault?
Right.
Really?
Exactly.
No,
Right.
no, it's
Right.
your fault.
Exactly.
And just like you said, hey, you got me. Where do I
Right.
sign?
Right.
And the cop either gives you a warning or they give you a citation or whatever it is, but it's not the cop's fault. And when you see compliance, you also see everybody going home safe.
Right.
So, when we hear these things about cops being the cause of so much destruction in our communities of color, it makes my skin crawl because I know personally that it's a lie. It's a slander of law enforcement.
Right.
It's absolute slander. When you pick out a certain cop, a specific cop, and we see it on TV, occasionally, and it is occasionally, when we look at the number of stops that the cops make or calls respond to, when you see that occasional, very, very occasional, very rare cop, then we should deal with that cop appropriately. But that's not representative.
Right.
That's not representative. Um, you know, I have my own experience in Alhambra, but again, being 7.5 years younger than you are, uh, mine are a lot more limited. But I had my encounters, and by the way, I'll be totally frank. There are a couple of times I got stopped in Alhambra, 2 in the morning, dropped my girlfriend off at 19 years old, driving dad's Cadillac. I'm thinking, maybe the guy did stop me because a black guy in a Cadillac at 2 in the morning, whatever. And I did get stopped a couple of times. And then what happened though?
Right.
What happened? Hey, where are you coming? Well, hey, I just dropped my girlfriend off. And okay, let me see your ID. Let me see your registration. Bobby gave him to it. All right, have a nice night. So if the worst thing gets happened to you is you get profiled, that's the worst thing in life. You know what? It's not too
Right.
horrible. And again, in my life, it was very, very rare. A couple of times in my whole life, I felt that may have happened. I know you're enjoying this episode, my brother. I know I am. And it's so good. We're actually going to make 2 shows out of this, 2 episodes. So stand by for episode 2 coming up for our next release.